Welcome, everyone, through all time and space to an all-new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, a podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give our thoughts on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will be covering the news from the first week of September 2020 and give our thoughts on what are the top 10 mecha animes from 1960 to 2010. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm a part-time weeb and full-time English language sensei. And with me, as always, is my co-host Sam Martinez, part-time weeb and full-time automail mechanic. How you doing today, Sam?
Hey, Mr. Johnson. ¿Cómo estás?
Hey, all right. So I've never heard a before. It sounds Greek, maybe because I'm being a little racist, but let's go with something from the Mediterranean language, maybe. So I'm going to go with Greek.
Ooh, nice. I would say you were close with the Mediterranean. So the language of today, it's a little bit of a sidestep from the language that we did last time. It's the Catalan language, and it's the number of speakers that are estimated to use this language are 4.1 million people. It's the official language of Andorra and a co-official language of 3 autonomous communities in eastern Spain, such as Catalonia, the Valencian community, and the Balearic Islands. It also has a semi-official status in the Italian commune of Alghero. I think that's how you pronounce it. So yeah, no, you were pretty spot on with it being in the Mediterranean region right there. I was just it
Yeah,
was just funny to me that the way they say hi was like the Fonz, like hey.
yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I was like, hey, who do I think about? I was thinking Grease from John Travolta's Grease, and I thought
Yeah.
that was it, but it was actually Fonzie. So yeah, I went a little too east with. I should have went more west with Mediterranean, but the Catalonians or the Catalonian Mountains, I believe. Yeah, so that makes sense. All right, cool. How am I doing? Pretty good. Pretty devastated by the latest My Hero Academia chapter, which I won't spoil, of course.
Oh, I saw. I heard. Apparently, there was like a character that they're not sure of what's going to happen, and I was like, I wish I didn't read that. Darn you, Google, for giving me little snippets like that when I open you up.
Yeah, really have to be careful with news feeds nowadays because people will act like something is not a spoiler when it is a spoiler. Like people's loose definition of spoiler has
Exactly.
gone really crazy in the recent times. But yeah, so not too much of a fallout because I'm hopeful. It's a hopeful situation. It's just like this where Horikoshi has taken the series is so not it's just so unexpected and dark that what's going on right now will be in like season 7. It'll be at the end, the second
Wow.
half of season 7. So we still got a few years until it gets animated. But, the steamroll of My Hero Academia can't really be stopped given the popularity. So, yeah, can't wait. But what else? School started back in earnest for me, so had my first week of full teaching. My new 12th graders are, the best people I've ever met. Sorry, sarcasm. Um, they ate my candy. One of my classes ate my candy that I left in the classroom by accident for
Oh
another class.
no. What type of candy was it though? It wasn't like old people
Like
candy.
no, it was like Snicker bars and like chocolates. So
Oh, bro. Yeah, that's gone. Oh, I'm
yeah, that's
sorry.
totally gone. But like you don't really expect 16, 7-year-olds to like steal from their teacher. So I was like, guys, that was for you like later for another class. And now I'm telling the other classes to see you in the hallway and beat you up. So I hope it was worth it.
I know, right?
But yeah, but Sam, how you doing?
Yeah, man. I'm doing okay. Having a bit of a vacation getaway with there is a Labor Day happening right now, and sort of just went back home in the sense of back to my hometown just to sort of decompress and de-stress, trying not to let the worries of the world get to me. That and try to get some game time in because I just got some gameage. I got the Ghost of Tsushima, but I want to finish up my Final Fantasy remake before I get started on that. So, going to be doing that this weekend sometime.
All right, perfect. Nothing wrong with doing a little gaming. Is there any
hmm
gaming news for us today, Sam? Since you got the news.
Oh yes, yes, that's a good segue. However, that's the gaming news that I do have. I want to have it to use that one as a segue for our next installment. So what I'll do is I'll go through some of the other news that we got, and just like always, we've with our news, just to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of anime. And what I have here is that there's news from Manga Entertainment UK, and they have revealed that they will be bringing the 4K edition of Akira to cinemas around the UK and Ireland soon. They didn't really disclose a date, but they mentioned that the screenings will include select IMAX theaters, and it's up to about 300 other locations among the islands. So it's just very interesting to hear that they're going to try to re-release Akira in theaters. What are your thoughts on Akira? Have you had a chance to see the movie, or?
Yeah, it's weird that Akira
Mhm.
didn't really. Well, it's not actually weird. It's Akira is one of those examples of how weird anime can, animation and anime can get. Where
Mhm.
Spirit Away had the welcoming appeal of
Yeah.
anime. It wasn't kidified or anything. It was just like a simple, innocent story that people are not used to this kind of animation and storytelling, that they were, introduced to it very gently. Akira is on the opposite side of that. You wouldn't
Oh yeah.
recommend Akira as a introductory film, same way as like Perfect Blue or Paprika, something along those lines. Since Akira does get far into the body horror, essentially, it would be like saying, "Oh yeah, let's start you out with a horror movie. Let's start you out with The Thing." So, and
Exactly.
then it's also intense sci-fi, having like the setting being in Neo Tokyo,
Yeah.
and Akira has been one of those blacklisted movies in Hollywood because it's so hard to find a director with the sensibilities to pick up that property and then make it, digestible for Western or American audience. So I'm very surprised to hear that London or the UK is getting
hmm
the hands kind of into that game of bringing Akira probably to a new generation. I mean, it is the time that Akira does make a revival, since the latest news was that Jordan Peele was going to tackle it recently, but
Yeah.
that doesn't really go anywhere just because he was the hot director with Get Out and his follow up film. So along the lines of where Akira is kind of one of those touchstones that remains in the hearts and minds of weebs everywhere. But it's good to hear that it's making a comeback, just like how Avatar recently made a comeback.
True. However, I'm not sure whether or not Akira would resonate with our society, our community nowadays. I mean, I guess in terms of maybe civil unrest, but the themes that they dealt with, especially, I've mentioned it before with the children and the biker gangs, because that was specific to that time frame when Akira was first made. And I don't know if those same worries, those same things will still capture the minds of today's society. So it would be interesting to see whether or not, or at least like to see a survey being taken out on whether or not new versus older generations had saw the movie. Just to see things of that nature. So, on to the next bit of news that I have. There is going to be, let's see, the main staff for the anime EX Arm was announced, and EX Arm is an adaptation of Shinya Komi's manga, and let's see, the it's going to be. I'm trying to find the director. And let me see. Maybe you should recognize some of these names right here. The series composition is supposed to be Tommy Morton, and Hajime Kimura would compose the music. And then it mentions, oh, it has these other people's names, but it doesn't necessarily say what they're doing. I guess like they're just people that's going to be in the cast. Soma Saito, Mikaku Komatsu, Akira Kito, and Akira Natsume and Miname Uzono. And essentially, the series, let's see, the series that it's based off of, it was in a manga called Grand Jump from February 2015 through November 2017. And the, excuse me, the main plot synopsis for the series is there was this teenager around 17 years old. He was essentially, it's supposed to be cyberpunkish. I can't remember if he had gotten a new piece of tech or if he was, I think it was some new piece of tech that he had gotten. And he ended up dying horribly. And then there's a flash forward to several years later where there is this sort of uh, Call of Duty Ghost Squad type personnel, and they have this computer system that sort of assists them in their day-to-day mission activities. And it turns out that the computer system is the mind of the kid that we saw get killed earlier on. So it seemed to be an interesting cyberpunk-ish type anime, and just sort of wanted your thoughts on just some of those cyberpunk type animes in general, like Ghost in the Shell. It doesn't, a little bit like with Mecha, it doesn't seem like we've seen a whole lot of them recently.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no shortage of cyberpunk or even sci-fi animes. I mean, I would say like Psychopass is like the one standout in recent years, and we
Mhm.
just had id Invaded
Yeah.
last year. So along I keep saying along the lines, but along the lines of like cyberpunk, that's No Gun Life, I believe it was called. I didn't really
Hmm.
uh, catch in or get on the hype train for that, but it seems to be completely well deserved, the acclaim that it's getting, and it got a second season just premiered recently. So the it's going strong in the sense of like there is a constant stream of it, like at least one good one every season, but where it
Yeah.
was before, like in the days of Ghost in the Shell, and like it was just kind of revolutionary. It kind of got a kickback around the time of the Matrix, and Western audiences were really getting hype around,
Oh
what's
yeah.
cyberpunk and what does all that mean? And even it kind of came back around with the Scarlett Johansson's reimagining, recasting, whatever you call it, the recent one in 2016,
Mhm.
and yeah, it sounds like what you just shared sound like something akin to like what is like kind of core with sci-fi or steampunk, and with
Yeah.
Decadence this season, it seems to be making a strong showcase. And there was also Altered Carbon on Netflix. We were seeing
Yeah.
that had a animated version or anime version of it called Resleeved, and then there was something else that just popped up. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing like if you're in the need for sci-fi. There's the Sci-Fi Channel, of course, but yeah, it's pretty easy to like deliver on like high concepts. You don't really need high budgets or like too much in the production way of good
Mhm.
sci-fi, but when it's done really well, it's done really well. And this seems like a case of it can be really done well since it has a solid core concept of disembodiment and what does it mean to be human, essentially what all good sci-fi kinds of talks about.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that, and I can't believe like I had forgotten about No Guns Life recently. I'm glad that you reminded me. But yeah, it seems as though every season there's always one good cyberpunk anime, and it's kind of weird too because even though they rehash the same themes like they would do in Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell, it doesn't seem to ever get old, which is kind of weird. Why do you think that is?
It never gets old because it essentially always asks that human question of if, not that we're like deserving to be alive, but what does it mean to be alive? We
Yeah.
see this in sentient mecha shows where, is a consciousness that's not arising from humanity real consciousness? And if a technology advances to the point that it does develop consciousness, is the human mind actually conscious? So there's always some kind of core mystery or like a core curiosity to that, audiences always want to question because essentially it's an existential question. I mean, the same reason why Rick and Morty, sci-fi shows like Star Wars will always come back into popular culture. Star Trek
Hmm.
has so many iterations with most recently like Discovery, that there's always something about sci-fi because we are scientifically curious creatures. So it's like
Yeah, true.
soap operas and sci-fis are like always going to be around.
I can see that. It's exploring the human condition, both in a naturalistic way as well as an emotional way. So, on to the last bit of news and the segue, as we've been doing lately, having news that deal with the mecha genre. And as we mentioned earlier, it is a video game type news. So, we're going full circle here. And just know that the game Zoids Wild Infinity Blast, it's a new game that's going to be on the Switch. It is slated to be launched in November 26th. Uh, Jay, have you heard anything about this new Zoids game coming up?
It is on my wish list. So, yeah, the Switch is like one of the few consoles I've owned. I've owned well, actually, it's the first console. No, that's not true. Well, the first console I've ever bought myself was the PS3, but that was at
Hmm.
university. So I've owned like the Nintendo 64, skipped to the GameCube, skipped to the PS2, then the PS3, and now I have a Switch. So, but I have like 27 games on the Switch. When I
Oh,
first
wow.
bought it, I bought
Yeah.
a 500 gigabyte memory card chip. So
Hmm.
I got plenty of downloadable space on my Switch. So yeah, and I even have a longer wish list, about 100 and something um, games on it. And
Yeah.
yeah, the e-store for the Nintendo Switch is very well organized. You have new releases, you have coming soon, you have new deals. And yeah, I was looking forward to this game in particular because I was in a space of like, what are good GameCube games that need to be
Yeah.
revisited? And what come up in my mind was the old Zoids game on the GameCube. I forgot the title of it, but it was like it was a battle royale. Essentially, you get dropped in
Hmm.
the city, and it's like, oh, you're this Zoid, and it's a sniping Zoid, so you have to get up on tall buildings and snipe from a distance, or you're a big tank, so you can't get through certain streets, so you have
Hmm.
to maneuver around the city. But yeah, it looks interesting that Zoids is still in popular. It's not really popular anymore. There was one recently, or maybe that was 2016.
No,
While I'm old,
so
but
are
yeah.
you talking about the show or are you talking about the video game?
Oh, the show. There was I think
Yeah.
2016 one. I think it was like Wild
So
something.
yeah, it was. I'm looking at it now. There was an anime in 2018 that had 50 episodes. It was called Zoe's Wild Project, and it has a sequel anime called Zoe's Wild Zero, which appeared in 2019. So but it was delayed in May due to who shan't be named, and it's supposed to be. I think it resumed on June 19th. So they not only had one show that happened recently, but it had two shows that happened recently, and Jay, give me a little bit about the information that you know about this particular game. What's so special about this one compared to the one that was on the GameCube?
Yeah, so I think it's just a thing of like recency bias where
Mm-hmm.
Zoids hasn't been like the most popular property in the mecha field. Like Macross and Gundams kind of are the ones that reign kind of supreme. And
Yeah.
Zoids has kind of been always that niche mecha,
Mm-hmm.
mecha show. And just why this is more important is because of how easy it is to develop for the Switch. And that it's not really a popular thing to like kind of get the audience. It's just like, oh, you guys remember Zoids? It's kind of one of those memberberry products. So like
Yeah.
if you're talking about like a reason, it's more memberberries than like actual, quality, not quality content, but more of yeah, again, memberberries.
I would say, well, I don't know if this was something that was in the previous game. You can let me know if it was the same or not. But from what I've been reading, it seems like one thing that they wanted to hype up with this game was the fact that you're able to customize your Zoid. So it's not as though, like as you said, they sort of give you a Zoid and you just work with it. It seems like this one is taking a more of an arcade approach, where in most other arcades where they have mech anime or mechas that you can pilot, sometimes you can customize it to make it more suitable to your play style. And again, from what I've seen, it seems like they were just trying to hype up that feature. Really.
Yeah, of course, because that's kind of what most video game like big cash money, not loot
Mm-hmm.
box, well, kind of the loot box, Skinner box kind of thing of, oh, you can customize your Zoid how you want it as long as you pay kind of model. And it makes sense that if this is like a mobile game and on the Nintendo Play Store, like you have your little kid and you want your Zoid to look a certain way, want a certain color scheme, but you need your mom's card and you can sneak it from her wallet when she's not looking. So it falls
Pay
into
for all the
that.
special
So it
hats.
seems right. So like Zoids has always been, in the same sphere of Gundam that it's, they had Gunpla essentially. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
Zoids you would call anything Zoid's Gunpla, but yeah, in the same way that they were like connectable pieces and you could technically customize them, given that like Liger Zero is kind of like the big uh, Zoid that kind of stands above all the rest, and he had like different customizations and different modes that he could
Mm-hmm.
switch into. So it's probably something like that. It's like a good business choice to get
Yeah.
people to like grind in your game to make in-game purchases. So it seems like to be a money-making adventure for sure.
That's all that I have for the news today. And as I said, it will be a great segue to our next segment. Jay, would you like to announce it?
Of course, yeah, I got you. Yeah, thank you, Sam, for the news. Of course, that was our anime weekend roundup. So, got good news
Mm-hmm.
stories. So, to transition, codes will always be in the description, and we're talking about the top 10 mecha anime from 1960 to 2010. We're a retrospective podcast, so we're not covering anything from the last 10 years. So, we stopped at 2010 as our endpoints, and starting back in 1963 when Astro Boy was released, which is, quote unquote, the first mecha anime,
Mm-hmm.
though that kind of definition has changed over time where, androids and cyborgs and those kind of um, organisms, creatures, entities still fall under mecha, but it's kind of not the modern use of the word mecha, which is just super big robots smashing things. Because it's
Exactly.
easier to say, it's easier to say like mecha is not sci-fi. Mecha is its own thing, but a lot of stuff under sci-fi can be classified as mecha. So this
Mm-hmm.
list might be very wildly different from the list that I assembled to what you assembled, but we had just agreed upon the top 10 mecha anime. So we included OVAs. The only thing that we excluded was movies. So how this is going to work. We've never done a top 10 list before, so let's see how well that goes. We've only done top 3 and top 5. But as always, whenever we do a list, we have 3 things that we respond to each other with. That is bench, which if I say a title or anime title that's not on Sam's list, that he'll say bench, and that means it's not on his list. If I say another title and he says Kobe, then that means it's in the same spot on his list. And Yeet, if it's on his list but it's higher up, so it's further up on the list. So Sam, what is your top, or what is your number 10 on your list?
My number 10, I would say, is Gunbuster from 1988.
All right, that is a Yeet.
Oh, really?
Yes. All right, cool. So that's farther up on my list. So we yeeted it.
Okay.
So my number 10, we'll just trade off one apiece. My
All right.
number 10 is Demon Bane,
Demon
2014
Bane.
or 2004. Yes.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. I haven't heard of Demon Bane. Mind giving a quick synopsis?
All right, so it's a bench for you, no problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this premiered back in 2004. It's an OVA series, just one
Okay.
episode. And the reason that this one episode made my list is because it has such a intriguing premise is that there is this mysterious mech going around this city called what was the city called? Oh, Arkham City. And there is, it's one of those cities where in anime it's like all these weird things are happening and no one's like really trying to figure out why. They've kind of just accepted it as normal. So it's like, oh,
Oh.
Godzilla showed up. Cool. It's just another Tuesday. But like no one's like in the cities like trying to figure it out. So the series revolves around this journalist coming in from the outside trying to investigate what this mech is
Yeah.
and who is the pilot. So she gets involved with this like evil organization trying to do the same because she's like discovering secrets. So it makes her a target. So it's just a very roundabout way of not dealing with like, mechas and,
Hmm.
fighting kind of what you would expect in a series, but it's like kind of what is the effect of the existence of a giant robot in like daily living for people and what kind of people would benefit from it, what people would do to kind of keep it a secret or to find out
Hmm.
more about it. So it's just like an intriguing investigation episode. I believe it's only 50 minutes. I should have written down the runtime of it, but it's
Yeah.
just one OVA episode, a spy studio group TAC, and it was
Okay.
well animated. The character designs stand out pretty much well enough. It's early 2000s, so nothing too incredible. It kind of has that post 90s, pre 2010s kind of look to it. So it's not outdated or anything. Like the cell animation is really good. Nothing's too jarring. No use of CGI. So overall, it's just a pretty good series that, demanded to be the trendsetter for my list. So Sam, what's
Okay.
your number 9?
My number 9 is Rideback from 2009.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so that's an honorable mention. So that's a bench for me.
Oh, it's a bench for you. Ah, nuts. So, just to give a little bit backstory on Rideback, what is well, you can say a little bit more because I was only able to watch a little bit of the shows as I told you with a lot of these shows because I was just trying to hit through all the list. I didn't get a chance to watch all the series in their entirety. So my main goal was to watch the first 3 episodes to see whether or not it would intrigue me, and if I felt some sort of way about them, I would put them on my list. And Ride Back, I wasn't able to watch all 3 of the first episodes, but I was fairly captivated by the story. So I do see myself finish watching this series, and it revolves around this girl known as Rin Ogata, where she was a ballet dancer who was essentially came from a family of ballet dancers, and she was talented. She ended up hurting herself, and she quits. She's in college and she joins the drama club and runs into another club known as the Rideback Club, where they ride these sort of ATV vehicles that are motorcycles that turn into biped humanoid mechas that you can still control like a motorcycle. And she seems to have a very natural feel for driving these machines because of her ballet training. And it seems like riding these machines is sort of her overcoming her grief of losing her possibilities of going into the ballet career because of her injury. And it seems as though there's also some shady government stuff that's going on because of these type of mechas. So I can see myself getting interested in that show, and I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't as popular, or I didn't hear about it when it first came out.
Right, yeah. So it's a very not underwhelming, but it's just something that slipped by. It's under the radar is
Yeah.
what you say. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's very much a subdued story. And again, it's a story about her trauma that she's kind of going through with that injury. She's,
Hmm.
she had this passion, and then this, with most athletes or performers in like the physical arts, there's any injury could be like the end of your career. So that she finds this piloting a mech, essentially like kind of her recovery and giving her an opportunity to do what she was, dreaming to do, essentially allowing the mech to be her feet, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the core of the story. But then what really tops the story is how much gruesome violence goes on throughout the series. A lot of people get like sliced in half. There's a lot of
What? Holy
blood.
smokes! Okay.
Yeah, so like that's definitely a R rated 17 plus series, and it didn't make my list just for that reason, that it's overly violent sometimes in a very unexpected way, and it
Oh,
just catches you off guard every single time for me in particular. So yeah, that's why it stayed off my list. But yeah, that's a good number 9, Sam. So my number 9, this is why I
yeah.
didn't want you to mention your honorable mentions. My number 9 is
Okay.
Eureka 7.
Oh, okay. Why is Eureka your number 7? And give us a little synopsis on it too.
Yeah, so Eureka 7 came out in 2005. It has 50 episodes.
Yeah.
And I mean, before I even get into that, this is one of two series on my list that has 50 episodes. And this is the
Hmm.
series where that 50 episodes were not deserved. But the thing about Eureka 7 is
Go on.
it's about this mechanic named Renton. He stumbles upon a crash mecha named the Norvas Type Zero and his female pilot Eureka. And he ends up getting recruited by her to join a mercenary group called the Gecko State. And the
Hmm.
reason that this made my list, and it's not high up my list, so it's not like it's praiseworthy essentially, but the
Yeah.
reason why I say it's top 10 worthy is that there's so many parallels to Star Wars in this series that I just found so attractive, where Renton, kind of much unlike the typical mecha main boy character, is that he's like Luke Skywalker. He has like ambitions to do bigger, better things. Like he idolizes the Gecko State mercenaries for what they do in the world. Like this is a world still at war, and like this mercenary group is what he wants to join, he wants to pursue, when his grandfather's telling him, no, stay on our little mechanical farm, repairing little things. And he dreams to have a bigger life. And what really caps this off is that, as a series worth number 9 spot, is that there's this romance that goes on in the series that is so full-hearted, wholehearted, and genuine. Is between the antagonists of the series, Dominic and Amine. So we have like our two main casts with Renton and Oreka, but then on the other side we have Dominic, who is a military brat kid essentially, and then Anamine, who is basically a human experiments dealing with the extraterrestrial life that's going on in the show that they're battling or trying to. There's a lot going on in the show, like 50 episodes. Even though I said it's not worth the 50 episodes, there's a lot going on. But like their romance really sells me on the show and how it progresses very naturally. Like Anamine is a essentially a suicidal pilot for her mech, but she's not suicidal in the way of, oh, let me go to battle to get killed. She's like, oh, I need someone to kill me that's worthy of killing me. And the mech part of it is that they're robot surfing. And just for the iconic imagery of that every mech has basically a surfboard, because in this world there are like these heavy particles that the mechs manipulate to surf essentially. And also this is animated by Studio Bone, so it's beautiful to look at. The one downside is the 50 episodes, as well as the two uh, main characters, Renton and Oreka, aren't that interesting. Their love story is kind of like plain and boring, and they don't really have strong personalities that encourage you to watch them. But Dominic and Amane are the ones to watch, so that's why it made my list. So that's my number 9, Sam.
Can I say why? Oh, do you want me to talk about why I had benched Eureka, or save that for later?
Oh no, you can bench it. I mean, I know why you benched it, but yeah, please explain why.
As I said before, I was trying to go through these lists, and I was trying to brute force Eureka at first, and then they were the reason why I made my 3 episode test rule. But with like looking back at Eureka wouldn't have passed my 3 episode test. I wouldn't have liked it at all if I had just done the 3 episodes. But because of all the acclaim that it had, I wanted to give it its due. However, I had started too late in trying to watch all 50 episodes, and so I wasn't able to finish the story. I know that there's something there, and the main reason was that made the first 3 episodes insufferable for me was the main character, really. And I understand, like looking back on it now, like they try to make him as realistic as a teenager as they could, but dude, he takes stupid slash aloof teenagers to a new level. And as I said before, I definitely know that there's stuff that's there, and they deal with heavy topics, and the world itself that they are set in, it's very interesting. But for me, it's a lot of work, and I mentioned this earlier too. Like it sort of got into my headspace because like you're dealing with this dark themes that are there, and I'm trying to sift through them. And as you said, there's 50 episodes, man. It doesn't need to be that long. They could have condensed it down. But again, I was just kind of surprised that it was on your list because you mentioned that with Rideback they have a lot of gratuitous violence. But from what I've seen in Eureka, they have just as much violence as you mentioned that Rideback has. So
Yeah, right. So yeah, it does. It definitely does side into the violence sometimes, but there's just something how certain violence is portrayed, because there's like grotesque violence and there's like PG censored violence, and Eureka
yeah.
Seven leans into more of that childish version of violence depiction. So it didn't really catch me the same way as Ryback did. But yeah,
There was
everything you
yeah.
said true. Like everything you said was true about Renton. Like he's just
Mhm.
not a likable character. I mean, he's written that way. He's written as a
So that's
gullible, stupid.
intentional then.
Yes, yeah. I mean, because it's pretty
Okay.
consistent throughout. You see that he's growing as a person, but like who he was at the very beginning, he's just a dumb farm boy essentially.
Yeah.
So that's where it's leading from. So I mean, if you can get past like the dumb shenanigans that he gets into, or how awkward he is around Eureka while she's going through her own kind of personal journey to understand humans, that,
Mm.
it's still a it's an entry on my list, but no, 9 is nothing noteworthy to kind of cry home about. When we get into our top 5,
Yeah.
then when you start objecting to things, then I'll start fighting back, Sam. But yeah, so that was my number 9. So
Okay.
Sam, what is your
Yes.
number 8?
My number 8 is the Big O.
All right, that is a yeet.
Hey! Do you want to talk about it, or should I? I just bashed your record. Go ahead and give us why Big O is on your number 8 spot.
No, it's higher. It's a yeet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, yeet. I'm sorry. Kobe is when we're on the same thing. Never mind. Okay, I'll save mine for later. So go ahead. What's your number 8? What's your number 8? What's your number 8?
Yeah, my number 8 is, I'm forgetting how to pronounce this. It's like Aquaran. Maybe I'm putting some more pronunciations into that, but it's Aquaran, Aquairon. So this premiered back in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Is this on your list, Sam?
No, that's a bench for me. Go ahead and tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, so this is a 26 episode series, and basically the premise is that this race of aliens called the Shadow Angels,
That
not the
sounds
most creative
super
name.
emo.
Yeah, not the most creative name for, alien race, but the pilots that are charged with defending the Earth is very much in the same vein of how we've seen with Gundam Unicorn. The last 7 episodes ago, is that
Mhm.
the pilots that are in charge of the Akron, which is the name of the mech, have to like basically fuse together. They have to do this like neural link that we saw in Pacific Rim, where like multiple pilots have to pilot the mech, and they have to kind of
Okay.
blend together their minds, hearts, and souls. Blah blah blah. There's a lot of mystical
Yeah.
elements into that, but it's all set in some kind of sci-fi shenanigan technobabble. But the thing that really struck me about the series and why it's so high on my list is that they do lean into the things that Gundam Unicorn did well when addressing like shared trauma and
Hmm.
where do you separate one person when they're sharing memories with you? Like, how do memories affect your emotional state? How do they affect your current sense of self? And the series, like 26 episodes, it has some pretty good animations by Studio Satlight. They'll come up
Hmm.
again on my list because they're like maybe one of the top 5 mech studios in Japan, like up there with Gainax and Trigger and
Yeah.
Sunrise. So Satlight is up there. But yeah, they always do good work. The series just caught my attention. 26 episodes, easily digestible. It's pretty fast paced, well written. The characters are interesting enough. Like one of the characters is like kind of feral, to use that word, is like
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see their tsundere side when it comes to piloting, because like every pilot has like their own personalities, but what happens when those personalities start to blend? So it's very much a psychological driven show, and it's always good to see those kind of things mixed into mecha. So yeah, that's why
Oh
it's on my
yeah.
list. All right,
Awesome.
so that's my number 8. So Sam, what's your number 7?
My 7 is IGPX, the Immortal
Oh,
Grand
IG.
Prix.
Oh my gosh, that should be on my list. That's a bench for me. That's a bench for me.
Oh my goodness! And just to talk about it a little bit, as I said, it had me go back through my history, and again, IGPX was on around Cartoon Network around the same time as Big O, and I mentioned to you this a little bit earlier that it would be a little controversial, mainly because it's a Cartoon Network original series. So, is it anime? Is it not? I don't know. It looks just like any other anime that I've seen, and I considered it anime until I looked into it. So, for all sakes and purposes, it's an anime. And the thing was just a little bit of background on the show. It follows this team known as Team Satomi in this sport known as the Immortal Grand Prix. And what they do is the teams ride in groups of 3, in giant mechas, and they essentially race other teams throughout this time, and essentially they can fight these other teams, and each position that are going in this sorry, each position that you finish in this giant tournament, the team gets so many points. And it's just very interesting watching this show. I hadn't had a chance to finish it, but I went back and I watched the first 3 episodes, and oh my goodness, bro, the first 3 episodes for this show are so good and so solid, man. The writing and the characters and it's so great because essentially Satomi is basically this novice team of ragtag individuals. One guy that's super talented but lazy, another person that's a hard worker, very strict and stern, and then the third person is somebody who's essentially a child genius who built her own giant robot and can talk to her cat whenever she's in there, like psychically, in her giant robot. So essentially trying to see this greenhorn team essentially go in their first season into this very renowned tournament and see them fight tooth and nail to get higher up in placement as well as find sponsorship too. So it was just really fun. I can't believe I hadn't finished it. Now after watching those 3 episodes, it made me realize why I was interested to begin with. So yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. So, yeah, I did think about this one because, interesting enough, in
Mm-hmm.
my seventh spot, I have a sports mecha as well.
Oh, really?
So, like,
Okay, go
yeah, so
ahead.
it's interesting. Interesting at both our seven spots, we have this like competitive mech anime. So, my number seven is actually Zoid's New Century. And I know that's not really.
Yes. It was a toss up between that one and this one for me. So why did you choose Zoids for your number 7?
Yeah, so it's really interesting that in 2001, and this is like 26 episode series, there's a couple of ones that came out in like kind of that Toonami Cartoon Network kind of showcase. And this was the
Yeah.
other one, which was, this one I'm talking about is New Century, but there's also Chaotic Century is the other one,
Yeah.
which people know about, Zoids between those two series, even though Zoid has, multiple series and installments. But this one in particular caught my eye and made my list because this covers what happens after, mechs are like used for war. Because like Zoids are these animal shaped battle mechs, but in the
Hmm.
series that they're no longer being used for warfare. So instead, they're being used for like sporting events,
Hmm.
essentially like kind of like a rodeo essentially between teams. They get into their zoids with like special abilities or special armaments and capabilities, and they basically battle out in a sporting kind of tournament and one-on-one battles and team battles. And the Liger Zero gets what I mentioned earlier about all of its iconic uh, armor changes, like
Yeah.
the Panzer. There's always that other one I always forget.
Jaeger.
Jaeger, yeah, thank you,
Hmm.
Jaeger, yeah, the green one. Snyder's the orange one, and then the Panzer's the green one.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this is basically a world where it's like post-war essentially, and that all these mechs that were instruments of destruction are just now being used as playthings essentially. And it follows the story of Bit Cloud. He's a junk dealer, but he
Hmm.
gets into a good relationship with Liger Zero because in this world, like the Zoids have somewhat of a consciousness or a sentience to them, and he joins Team Blitz. And the team's like this, again, like a ragtag group of underdogs, and they're going against these bigger teams. So that whole shonen sports trope that you were just talking about with your choice,
Yeah.
mostly I know about because of Haikyuu. That's kind of the only other sports anime I kind of have under my belt. But yeah, this is by Studio Zexbis. It's Xebec. Nothing too extraordinary
Yeah.
on the animation front from their ends. I mean, this is 2001, so nothing too Sakuga, artist kind of
Mhm.
touch in the animation. But for a series that kind of just breaks from tradition, having Zoids be like these animals, and
Yeah,
how
instead of
team
humanoid
based
robots. Hmm.
yeah, how team based competition works among like mechs. It's just an interesting place in mecha history. So that's why it made my list. So Sam, what is
Hmm.
your number six?
My number six is Blue Gender.
Never heard of it, so it's a bench for me.
So essentially, Blue Gender, it was an anime in 1999 through 2000. The manga came out afterwards, and essentially it's a little bit like Futurama, except the guy who got frozen, it was intentional. He was sick, he had an illness, and they put him in cryo freeze until his illness was supposed to have been cured. He wakes up from his pod 22 years later just to find out that the whole earth is overrun by these creatures that everybody calls the blue, and they look like these insects, giants, alien-like creatures. They don't really know where they came from. They just know that they don't- they being the humans at this time are just doing their best to fight them. And again, like the whole Earth is overrun, so much so that essentially mankind is living in a space station in space. And what they were doing was the people that survived, they were going back and rescuing people. Well, not really rescuing. I hadn't gotten that far yet to see why they were uh, taking these people, but they were essentially going and taking these people that were cryogenically frozen and taking them back with them up into space. And with him, his capsule happened to burst open at the time, so he has like this shell shock and sort of coming to grips with what happened with his family, his friends, and it was just interesting to me because I've been suggested this show by some friends of mine in the past, and it was I would say like it's a, sort of like a different take on a man out of time perspective. It's not that far into the future, but it's just far enough to where things are different, things have changed, and not only that, but there was also things that happen in this show where it's a little bit like Final Destination in the sense of there's no real plot armor for people, so the stakes are definitely there, and it seems as though like whenever the main dude and the company, when they do survive a situation, it's well earned because again there's no sense of you're safe just because you're the main character. So that was sort of one of the reasons why I had put it on my list.
All right, cool. Yeah, that's a good
Hmm.
choice for your last of your top, your top or your bottom five of your
Yeah,
list.
the
All right,
bottom
so
five. What's your
yeah,
number
so
six?
my number six is Lime Barrels of Iron.
Oh, that's a bench for me, but I feel as though I should have heard about it. What? Tell me a little bit of Line Barrels.
Yeah, so Line Barrels is the name of the mech in the show and came back out in 2008. It has 24 episodes by Studio Gonzo, and it basically follows a young mech pilot, age 14, high school student, but he gets
Yeah.
caught up in, the going ons in the show, and he gets basically placed in charge of a girl named Emmy and the robot named Lime Barrels. And the thing that got it so far up on my list is that there's this real connection is that the main character, Koichi, is just a loser in the sense
Oh my
of
goodness. I'm sorry.
yeah, but
Go on.
he's an outright loser. So like instead of the way of, these stoic main characters, kind of destined for greatness, like he's just this loser kid that gets bullied at school. He gets beat up and, he's failing grades. He has no ambitions. He's kind of like
Yeah.
detached from life in kind of like this so real, depressing way. Not, like angsty before being angsty sinks.
Hmm.
He's not an edgelord or anything. He's just like a teenager going through teenager, depression essentially.
Yeah.
And when this mech and the girl comes into his life, you see that they have this effect on him, presenting him like this new perspective on life and like giving him a chance to like make new friends, stand up to his bullies, give him like a confidence boost. And it's just this really touching story of, that you wouldn't see generally in most mecha. It's just
Okay.
a heartwarming story of, a boy coming out of his shell versus all the other kind of drab MCs that kind of just pollute the genre here, and it just really caught my eye, and that's why it made it so far up on my list. But yeah, that's my bottom five, Sam.
It sort of reminds me of Kenichi, the history's strongest disciple, or Hajime no Ippo. It sounds a little bit like a sports anime in terms of the combat sports main antagonist, oh, sorry, main protagonist, where, like you said, the main character is getting beaten up and bullied, but then they run into this discipline that gives them the strength and the skill to build up confidence to sort of fight back or to defend themselves whenever they need to. So, no, like you said, that sounds like a very refreshing uh, breath of fresh air within the genre.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, and it's so weird because I keep moving through our list because we don't have
Yeah.
any in common yet. So we don't really have any. We can't really give a back and forth thoughts about what we have seen that's on our list. But okay, now but for our
Yeah.
top five, now we might be getting into fighting territory if none of us are on
Yes.
the same list. But Sam, what's your number five?
I would have to say my number five is Pat Labor or Pat Labor.
Okay, that's a bench for me. I've never heard of this.
Okay,
So tell me
so
about it.
it's one of the older stuff. The manga was out in 1988, and the OVA came out the same year, and they had a I forgot what the acronym was for. It's a NTV, but it was essentially the anime. It came out in 1989, and I would have to say I watched the OVA for this one, and oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I was gonna love it so much. So essentially, what Pat Labor is about, it follows this police force this in this time of Tokyo. They have these mechs that essentially work as exoskeletons. So you know the giant robot that Ridley had piloted in the Alien movies.
Yes.
So like that, like essentially those are called labors in this world where they use them to do construction or to do other types of things. And in the show, it sort of takes a Mega Man approach where there are people who are disgruntled and they go around and they steal these labors to do crimes. And so essentially they have this special task police force that addresses these issues with labors. And it's funny too because the team that you follow, it feels like a Brooklyn Nine group or subdivision that's essentially policing these people and having to deal with these sort of cases. So it's sort of like a monster of the week slash case of the week, and it's also very light, but they do have the potential to get to deal with heavy themes. So it's a good balance because as we mentioned earlier with all the other mecha animes, there's a general theme or a general path that most mechas go where everything's dark and broody and there's like little to no hope about the situation, and it's sort of nice to have a slice of life type feel to the mecha genre.
All right. Yeah,
So
I like it. That's pretty good. I haven't heard of this. So was it probably got under the radar. Also, it probably
yeah.
just slipped past me since I wasn't after this time, Well, if you looked at my list so far, you see that all of my shows are from like the mid 2000s. So
Hmm.
it's weird that my mecha watching activeness kind of dropped after that point. So yeah, since it's in your top five, I definitely will put it on my list to watch. But my top five, my number
Yes.
five. I'm going to hear another bench from you, but it's Macross Frontier.
So it's a bench for me, mainly because I don't know how to watch the Macross series. So why is Macross number 5 for you?
Yeah, so it feels in the same vein of Gundam that it's
Hmm.
this expansive legacy kind of property with so many installations, and it's has all kind of mismatching tones. You don't know where to start. You don't know who to follow. But yeah, for Macross Frontier, this happened back in 2008. It has 25 episodes. Again, not the most easiest watch, 25 episodes, but there
Hmm.
is so much going on in this series that it feels like you can just binge it. So it's like I put it on my list for the bingeability of it,
Oh,
for
okay.
entry level into the Macross universe. But basically, it's taking place where humanity is basically driven to the brink of destruction. So they take off from
Hmm.
Earth on this like kind of fleet of colonial ships, kind of in the same vein as Battlestar Galactica, and
Okay.
the story follows basically a young trainee mech pilot, and his job is to protect a, um, a music singer during the series.
Oh,
And
this is the one where they deal with music and oh, okay. That's this one.
yes,
All right.
perfect. Yeah, that's also why it made my list, because Macross is kind of infamous for its introduction of the idol genre
Yeah.
into mecha. So it plays very well in here. It kind of plays in the same vein as not Carol and Tuesday, but like the music is not too distracting. Like the idleness is not too distracting. It's kind of like a good educational piece of the idol industry, the idol culture, what it means to be like a fan of it, what it means to be a
Yeah.
singer in it. So there's like so much loaded into the series that it feels very much of like, oh, I'm learning something about, Japanese culture. And then there's
Okay.
like big sci-fi stuff. The mech battles are extremely well animated. Like they have interesting designs. The original species that drove off the humans were like this giant race of giants, but in the series they're battling this biomechanical species called like the Virtro, and they have great design to them. The mech that he's piloting, Alto, the main character, piloting, has a very interesting look to it. Something that reminded me like there's like this mech armor in Kingdom of Hearts, like it has like these pointy ears that go straight up. So it kind of
Okay.
reminded me of that a little bit, with like a large visor over its face instead of like
Hmm.
features. So yeah, if you're looking at a good introduction to the Macross universe, I would
It
start
would
with
be
Frontier,
Frontier.
because
Okay.
it's kind of detached from everything else, and it's just a good standalone story. But yeah, that's my number five. We still have only two in common right now. So, Sam, what's your number four?
All right, so my number 4, I had slated for essentially anything within the Gundam franchise. Me in particular, it would have been Gundam Unicorn for the seasoned Gundam veteran, and Gundam 00 for the person that's wanting to get into mecha.
Wait. So, what was your choice? It's a top 10 list.
I know it's a top 10 list. I know it's a top 10 list. Okay, I'll go ahead. I'll say it's Gundam Unicorn.
All right, cool. That's a bench. But it makes all the sense. I'm glad one of us put it on our list, because, it would be weird if we covered it for 7 episodes and didn't put it on either of our lists. So yeah. So I mean, we don't really need to talk about it, but overall, it just stayed off of my list because, again, we didn't talk about how we were going to organize our individual lists. But I saved one spot for a Gundam, and it did not make it didn't fly to that number one spot along the whole history of Gundam. And I've watched a lot of Gundam, apparently, because, oh my gosh, I think I counted 12 of series that I've seen, counting back because there's a good list of 100 mechas that you should watch, and for that list, I've seen like Zeta, Double O. Can I name them all? Zeta, Double O, Wing, Seed, Destiny, War in the Pockets, Build, Gun. Oh, well, I don't want to go past the 2010s, but yeah. So, and I haven't seen the original, but yeah, long list. But Sam, like, why is it so high on your list?
So the reason why Gundam Unicorn is so high up on my list is because I didn't want to overload the top 10 list with Gundam. I was only going to limit it to one Gundam series, and out of all the Gundam series that I've seen, that works. And that's not only good in quality in terms of story, but it's also in terms of music and character development. And Gundam Unicorn just really did all that for me. And if you go back and listen to what we've that review that we did of Gundam Unicorn, you'll see why it has such a high regard in my heart.
All right, cool. Yeah, completely fair. I mean, we've talked about it for more than what, 10 hours. So,
Yes.
yeah, so it's kind of stated that it's a great series, and it's definitely one that you would say maybe the top 10 list of the decade, Gundam Unicorn.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, makes sense that it's so high up on your list, Sam. But anyways, my number four,
Yes.
since
What's your number four?
it was a yeet from your list earlier. This is the Big O.
Oh, okay. So why is Big O so high up on your list?
Yeah, so this series was right in again with that Toonami showcase of anime in the West, and if you want
Mhm.
to compare the Big O to anything, it would be like if you would say, what is a story with Batman and a mecha?
That's
Because
literally what I have in my notes. Is like, what if Batman had a giant robot? That's essentially what it is.
yeah, the instead of Bruce Wayne, it's Roger Smith. He's a negotiator by trade, but then on his side hustle, he is a mech pilot. And
Hmm.
the whole appeal and why it's so high up on my list is because there's this very neo noir sense to the show where there's this
Yeah.
giant mystery where the town that Roger Smith is in, that he's like being the protector of, is called Paradigm City. And there was an event 40 years ago in the show's time that basically wiped everyone's memory, and no one can discover why that is or why that happened. So a lot of the
Yeah.
mystery of the show that revolves around uncovering that truth, but there are also like giant robots. There's villainous organizations. This reminds me of a movie back in the early 2000s called Dark City. It kind of had that same mystery about like a dark city and like the secrets keeping it afloat.
Hmm.
And this isn't Studio Sunrise, one of the big three studios that do mechas very well. And there's like this gothic aesthetic. Again, like if you think about
Yeah. Like
Gotham
the
City and in
yeah, in
the
Tim Burton's got Gotham City.
Tim Burton
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, so it's very much akin to that kind of aesthetic. And the design to Big O, the mecha in the show, is that it has like these giant pile driver arm cannons.
Hmm.
And that's such an interesting design for a mech to have. And it's just like it focuses on like the weightiness of the mech. Like there's like this kaiju level of destruction that goes on in the city by Big O. I mean, he's not really trying to minimize damage. Like every single battle with the Big O is kind of like Zod versus Superman and Man of Steel.
Yeah.
So there's like this real good sense of size that Big O deals. But Sam, it made your list too. So why is it on your list?
It was essentially again, like you said, with just the mysterious aspect of the entire premise, like you said, with the mystery of trying to figure out why there's this memory lapse that's there, and all that Roger does as a negotiator and sort of trying to see or try to understand how this society is functioning, because with some of these people that have these memory lapse, all of a sudden they just get all their memories back, and there's other people where they're just getting fragments of their memories back. And it's just interesting to see how these people react. And I would say the reason why it's so low on my list is because essentially it's a riff off of a Batman story, and Batman is always an interesting character. So it's not as hard to write for him, but still, Big O, even though there's a lot of similarities to Batman, it's still a very good show.
Yeah, I agree with that. But it's interesting that you call it a riff, given that one of your top three is a riff on something else on my list. So, what's
What?
your number three, Sam?
So I'm not gonna lie, my number three is gonna make me seem a bit basic, so don't judge me too hard. It's Code Geass from
All right,
2006.
that's a yeet.
That's a yeet for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we have three in common on our list. What is your number three?
Yeah, my number three is a yeet from your number 10 spot, which is Gunbuster.
Oh, Gunbuster. Yes, let's talk about Gunbuster. So why is Gunbuster so high on your list?
Yeah, so from, like you said, Sam, it's a 1988 series. It's an
Hmm.
OVA, actually. It's only 6 episodes. And, you know, it has a central plot that's just two female pilots are defending Earth from a race of like space insectoids, I
Hmm.
guess is what you would call them,
Yeah.
like space bugs essentially. And it's starting in like the history of humanity, like right when they're exploring space, they're starting to explore space. So it's very interesting that it's a story where, you know, we encountered some extraterrestrial force and then needed mechs versus, you know, mechs being developed as just like a natural
Hmm.
state of technology inside like warfare. So like we
Yeah.
reached a point where we started to you know, advanced past a type 1 or type 0, type 1 civilization. So we started exploring
Hmm.
space and doing civilization building on other planets, but then we encountered another species and we were like, hey, we need to defend ourselves. So mechs. And the riff that I was talking about is that this is basically the progenitor for Gurren Lagann. So everything that Gurren Lagann plays on
Oh,
Gurren Lagann plays
I
on, like
I see that a little bit.
pays
Yeah.
homage to like the stance that one of the female pilots does. I think it's Noriko and Kazumi.
Noriko, yeah.
Yeah, the two pilots that, yeah, like one of their stance is what Kamada or Simon
Kamina. Yeah,
stands with
okay.
their arms crossed. And even the design to Gunbuster is kind of iconic, where the weaponry that goes on, like it's like destroying spaceships with this head laser. It has this sweet
Hmm.
cape, which like kind of acts as a cloaking device, and the animation on that cape is like so like fabric turns into like stardust essentially. It's like really beautiful to look
Oh,
at.
okay.
But there's also
Yeah. Go
there's
on.
also this dynamic. Sorry, I can keep talking about Gunbuster
Yeah.
because I'm overly impressed by it. It's in my top three for a reason that it has
Oh no, yeah.
even to like how it addresses sci-fi in the story, that there's this temporal distortion very akin to how Christopher Nolan tackles it in Interstellar, where they're
Yeah.
battling in space and they're battling in certain gravities, and gravity is how we perceive time. So essentially, whenever these pilots go into a battle, there's some kind of real there's like real personal like loss to them, because they may go
Hmm.
into a battle and like years have passed outside of that battle, and they're like doing this kind of this lone venturing, this lone defense against forces. Essentially, we don't get a real good scale of what these, you know, insects are. Are they a giant hive, like
Yeah.
kind of like an ender game, like they're a planet conquering force, and all they're doing is like defending. And it's a sad, tragic story. And I mean, we can get to Gurren Lagann if it's on your list, Sam. But yeah, everything that I like about this is that it's really grown up in the way of mech. Like it's not
Hmm.
overly sexualized because you have two female pilots, but they're not overly sexualized. Like something like in
I don't
Darling
know about
Franxx,
that
where
because their outfits compared to the male pilots.
well, yeah, it's kind of in the same vein as
Yeah.
Princess of Mars or Fifth Element, where it's like revealing, but it's not demeaning. That's what I mean by sexualizing. It's not like
Oh, okay.
to be ogled at, or, it's not played up in a sexual means. It's like the camera and the direction doesn't show us as
Oh,
the
yeah, the fan
audience.
service. Yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
As
So
you
it's
mentioned,
not
there's
like
no fan
really,
service.
yeah, it's not really pertaining to like um, fantilization. So I like
Hmm.
that, and it's grounded instead of like high concept sci-fi. There's like these real human moments of like the pilots breaking down when they realize like the consequences that they're what they're going through when they're risking not their lives, but also like what does it mean to be alive if all the people are essentially aging all around
Yeah.
you or like moving on
Hmm.
through their lives. So that's why it's so high up on my list. But Sam, why was it so low on your list? Why the
So
disrespect?
I know I need to put some respect on its name. I didn't get a chance to finish it. Also, I didn't get to see the scene where the Gunbuster mecha was introduced. The reason why I put it on my list was in the beginning we had that training montage, and usually in mecha animes we don't see any training on part of the main character. They just get in the pilot and they just know how to pilot it. And that was one thing that I appreciated because Noriko, she is in a military school and she's shown to be in class with her, with I can't remember the partner's name, but she's shown to do actual exercises where they have to move the mechs, things of that nature, have the mechs run, have them do all sorts of different exercises. And that was one thing that I really appreciated. And the fact that the main character was a female pilot too, that's not something that we get to see a lot of in this genre. It's usually from a young boy's perspective. So it was interesting to see it from a young woman's perspective, mainly somebody who has a legacy just like any other character, just seeing how a woman will react to having to deal with that legacy, having to shoulder that weight, and what she would have to overcome in order to uh, find her own legacy. And I didn't get too much into the time dilation. I only got to see the 3 episodes, but I saw a little bit of it where there was a lapse of 6 months, and that was one thing that I have heard that this show does with well in terms of the time dilation. And again, like you said, they deal with real human moments, and because the main characters, they're essentially still 17, they're out of high school, they still act as like high schoolers, but they're in this very real situation, they're in this war. And she run and it's sad because you have her make her first friend that's outside of her class, and she goes into battle with him, and she gets swept up in the battle, and she's trying to find him after the battle, and it turns out that he was one of the people that are killed by the opposing forces. And with most other mecha anime, that main character would break down and mentally would not want to do anything. But with her, like, it just pushes her to move forward and want to sharpen her skills a little bit. So I really do appreciate what I was shown in those episodes. Again, it would have been higher on my list had I finished watching the OVA. But from what I've seen, like, I do recognize the quality that is in Gunbuster, which is why it was on my list.
All right, cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, hopefully you'll be able to finish it and we'll maybe come back to it when we
Hmm.
do, a top 10 list again. Probably do a top 10 Gundam franchise series because there's so much good Gundam out there. And like we said, we limit
So
it
much.
to one each. on our
Mhm.
list, so not to overcrowd anything. But Sam, what's your number two? Even though I know already.
Well, it's Neo Genesis Evangelion. That's my number two.
Yep, that's a bench for me.
The reason why it's my number two is because of the amount of deconstruction that it does for the mecha genre and how it has impacted the genre. I personally, again, is one of those series where I wouldn't have finished it at all, but just following my 3 episode test. But because I sat through and I did it, like it's also a good case study too on getting a different perspective on somebody having a mental breakdown and like how that affects that person's work and things of that nature. And just with all the different just with the themes and the mental stress of taking a kid and putting them in a giant robot and giving them all this stress and of having to protect not only their city but the world as well, just how crushing and daunting of a task it really is. Because up until I've seen up until I've seen Evangelion, I just never really thought about it that hard. It's like, if a normal person was put into that situation, they wouldn't be so normal anymore. So that's why it's as high up on my list as it is. And as I said before, we've seen other shows that's definitely influenced by it ever since it came out. So
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things of like we just talked about. Well, I just made the allusion to Interstellar, and it's like saying, "Oh, what's your favorite
yeah.
Christopher Nolan movie?" Oh, it's obviously Dark Knight. Or what's the best Christopher Nolan movie? It's Dark Knight. That's just like one of those.
Yes.
It's not to say basic, but it's like one of those things of when you're so inundated with anime, like the masterpieces when you see it, like and
Mhm.
Evangelion has just been one of those standard masterpieces in the anime community since it came out, and even mentioned it during our covering of the mecha genre
Yes.
history, that how
Mhm.
big Neon Genesis is. But again, if you're talking about how to get into mecha, this is not where you start off anybody
No.
with. There's
No.
some kind of okay, so I benched it because I haven't seen it.
Yes.
Well, that's not true. I've seen it kind of. I'm really confused by it because there's multiple movies. There's something about
Yeah.
timelines going on.
Mhm.
Shinji's kind of like the worst.
He
Um,
is. He
there's
is
there's
the
a lot
absolute
of
worst.
I've seen a lot of disturbing images when it comes to that show. So I don't
Oh,
think I've
yeah.
seen it in its entirety. So, and a lot of things that deals with Christianity and like imagery is like, there's a lot to that show. Maybe I'll tackle it when I'm 50 or about to die. I don't know, but right now it stands as a strong like greatest mecha animes of all time. So a number two spot for you, Sam. I do know you're number one now
Yeah.
though, but my number two,
Yes.
Sam,
What's your number
is going to
two?
be a bench for you, but it's Mobile
Yeah.
Suit Gundam, the eighth MS team.
Oh, the eighth mobile suit team. Ah, that one was good. Okay, so why is it number two for you? Why is it number two?
I want to hear why it's not on your list. But anyways, oh yeah, you said you had one Gundam spy, and of course Unicorn would have taken that. But yeah, so
Yes.
of all the um, Gundam series that came out before this, the thing that I love about a team is that it's such a band of brothers story. I think I
Yes.
said the same thing
Yes.
about it when we covered the history of Mecha. Is that it has that vibe of like a good Suicide Squad or Saving Private Ryan, like those stories of like desperate humans trying to overcome a great war effort. I mean, even Rogue One kind of
Mhm.
had that, even though they kind of glossed over the team getting to know one another, so you care about them when they die. Even I would
Mhm.
say like the eighth team has this like Levi team from Attack on Titan vibe to it. Is that
Yeah.
everyone gets their like moment to shine? You get a good sense of their personality. You see that they're really well developed 3 dimensional creatures. creatures, people,
Hmm.
and just a war sense. They're newbies essentially, and this is a 1996 series. It has 12 episodes. It's an OVA technically, but 12 episodes is like gleaming to like full anime kind of terminology. But it basically follows a squad of Gundam ground troops, and they're basically on their first operation doing guerrilla warfare, and is
Yeah.
following them through this operation just to distract enemy forces. And it's so heartening to see what happens to them. I won't spoil it, of course, but it's a story about war, but it takes such a technical approach to everything. The animations given, a lot of stress in how the mobile suits move, how do they cut through buildings, how their arsenal
Hmm.
works, like the concussion from like a laser or gun going off, and just what does that do to Gundam pilots? A lot of that is psychologically driven. That you get kind of a not in the Gundam unicorn kind of way. You kind of like see this like
Hmm.
the neural field that we talked about in depth, and like battling ghosts and showing up. It's just like a real human story. I'd really recommend like Fury, which came out with like Shia LaBeouf and Brad Pitt, about just tank drivers. That's what it really feels like. If I were to make a parallel to like a recent Hollywood movie, like it feels like Fury. So everything
Okay.
that makes Gundam good is in the show. Again, it's not focusing on the spectacularness of space battles. It's like ground troops and down in the muck of, mecha
Yeah.
warfare, and, good characters. The musicality is not the same in Unicorn, which, it can't be really compared when you have Sawano directing. But
Hmm.
it's overall series that needs to be revisited and brought back up in the conversation. I mean, it's been what is that? 20 years now? Wait, how old? Yeah, 20 years
Yeah, you
almost.
said
Like
96, right?
yeah, 96. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's about
yeah, so
96.
pretty long time. But yeah, that's my number two. So Sam, oh my gosh, why is that not on your list? Oh yeah, we talked about it. I keep coming back to why it's not on your list. But yeah, Gundam Unicorns your list. Gundam Spot. Sorry. So knowing your
I
number
just, I just,
one,
I just, I just love it how it's like you were serious when you were saying that words were going to be had. It's like, why is this not on your list? Why is this not on your list? Uh,
yeah, but never mind me. But yeah, knowing what your number one is, what is your number one?
of course, it's got to be Tengen Toppan Gurren Lagann. There is no other spot on the list that is more suited for it.
Except for my number one,
Exactly.
which is on your list. So my number one is going to win out. But anyways, yeah. So that's a
Hmm.
bench for me. So tell me, why is
Yes,
Gurren Lagann your number one?
because I would say like it just really it was just like a revival of the mecha in terms of what what Evangelion did to it. Just basically just like broke it down. Essentially, Gurren Lagann it addressed all those issues, and it gave it's essentially it's like okay, yeah, it has all these problems, but this is all that the stuff that the mecha genre has to offer as well. And it was sort of a deconstruction slash celebration of the genre. As you said earlier, I didn't know that it had gotten a lot of cues from Gunbuster. So it definitely dealt with some of those tropes, and that was shown in Gunbuster as well as some other mecha shows, and it also dealt with the very human interactions or the very human element of what happens with death and how and grief and what one must do in order to overcome. And not only that, but you know, even though you can do everything that you can in a situation or everything that you can to set yourself up for success, you're still going to be hit with outside or external environmental factors that can mess up your plans and essentially how you can still overcome. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about that show is the hope of overcoming obstacles, whether they're internal or external, and how every time you're hit with an obstacle, it's still hard, but you can overcome it and not let yourself be succumbed to it. And just the amount of character growth and development that happens in the show, it's just so good, makes me want to gush. So that's why it has taken the number one spot for me, Jay. So what is your number one spot?
I like how you didn't talk anything about the story of Gurren Lagann.
Because it's well, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I don't really want to spoil, because the one of the major plot points that happened in that show really there's a big turn with one of the tropes that happens in the show, and it affects the rest of the show, and the characters have to deal with it. And after they overcome that giant hurdle, there are other hurdles that keep coming, essentially just showing you that, you know, life's going to shit on you no matter what you do. And again, you have that sense of overcoming. And I don't really want to divulge too much into it, because I feel as though it's one of those things where if you do give it away, it sort of takes power away from the show.
All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, number one spot, can't talk about the story. Good on you. So my number one is a yeet from your list, is
Oh
Code
yeah.
Geass. Yeah, Code Geass.
Oh, okay. So why is Code Geass your number one?
The contempt in your voice. So yeah, another sunrise project. Forgot to
I know,
mention, I
right?
think, yeah, Gunbuster is Gynax, and
Mm-hmm.
MS Team is also Sunrise. So again, top, and also Big O is Sunrise. So Big Daddy Sunrise for big top tier waifu mecha
Mm-hmm.
anime. So yeah, Code Geass is 50 episodes. So that's the other series that I was talking about when talking about Eureka. Eureka isn't worth the 50 episodes,
Uh, yeah,
but
but Code
uh,
Geass definitely is.
yeah, there is
I
so
agree with you
much
there.
going on. It's the one series that I have in the manga complete edition, like those big paperbacks, essentially.
Oh,
Had to
you
get,
do.
had to get it, had to get it. But yeah, so it's basically, wow, there's a lot to talk about here. But yeah, so the
Hmm.
simple, like the one line tag is that Lelouch, our main character, is an exiled prince from the Holy Empire of Britannia, and he
Hmm.
basically settles in Japan, where he starts a rebellion to free Japan from Britannian control.
Yeah.
And it's one of those iconic mechas that is easy to introduce someone to. There's the small progression of uh, the story beats. I mean, there's endearing characters. They have like great designs. The mechs are beautiful. Like there's a escalating power dynamic to the mechs because it's grounded in technology. There's like a research
Hmm.
team in the show that's developing mechs. So like there's a good progression of like, oh, you can see where the skill set of the pilots are developing. So
Yeah.
they're developing response to like the opposing forces, but there is moments of like uh un uncommon violence in the show. Like there's people getting mowed down, like people getting like on firing squads, civilians getting
Hmm.
killed because the Britannian Empire is just bad guys. There's really no black and whites. Usually with mechas, there is like some kind of gray, unless it goes into mecha about like alien forces and they're seen as the bad guys. But this is just a human story of, oh, Britannia's evil. um, Lelouch, the main C or the main character, does like questionable things. Like he does side on like you know what you would call villainous kind of scheming. He's the scheming type. So
Yeah.
why I put this as number one is that of all those things that stands out most is that It's easily digestible. There's like really no like downtime. Like there's no throwaway beach episodes. Again, like you can
Yeah,
show this to
exactly.
anyone. There's no lasciviousness with like
Hmm.
pandering to male fantasies. Lelouch is a likable, somewhat likable character that you just want to see succeed, and he goes through trials and
Hmm.
tribulations to get through getting to his goals. He has tragedy to build up his character. He has a little sister that he's taking care of. He has like, he's a
Nunnery.
high
Yep.
school student, so he has like the student body member. Like he has friends at school that get dragged into his war efforts. So like everything revolves and so tightly packed um, plotting, even with his best friend becoming an enemy to him at one point. And there's like part two, which is just called Lelouch of the Rebellion. And there's like this great season one cliffhanger that leads perfectly into season two. So like you can binge this again. Bingeableness is what I rate high on my list. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
why it made my list. So what do you have to say about Code Geass since it was your number three? Too low.
There's only two spots too low for you, sir. But I would have to say a lot of the reasons, like what you said, it's very easy to get into, and the world and the lore, everything's explained. It's also has that psychological cat and mouse type feel. For instance, I would always compare it to Death Note, but just with giant robots. And the thing is, again, because it's so digestible, and even though there's so many episodes to it, because of how it portrays how to deal with strategy and warfare and the character development, it doesn't, you don't feel that time. Again, it's what you mentioned about that bingeability. You want to keep watching, you want to see what happens, how they're going to get out of this situation, how Lelouch is going to get these ragtag team of people who were already their own group. How is he going to get them to start following him and taking his orders and not give out his identity? And not only that, it solves the problems with the high school friends, as we've seen in other mecha shows. For instance, with Gundam Unicorn, it falls flat on this front, where we have the main character, the main protagonist, and we have some colleagues of his from school. He gets little to no screen time with them, so we have no idea of what his rapport is with them, why they should even care that he's going out into the battlefield or things like that. We have scenes with him and his high school friends. We get to have that interaction with his friends, that sense of normalcy that he had before going into his endeavors. And we also get to see him struggling with that dual life in terms of juggling schoolwork as well as essentially being a leader for a terrorist group. So it's all those, like you said, these multifaceted depictions of these characters. And even then, the terrorist groups, they're, or the people in the group that he's leading, they're not all one dimensional. They're all have multifacets to their character, and they have their concerns, they have their reservations, they have their own reasons for fighting, and how they are trying to meet their goals. And so like it goes very well from this intimate setting to going from these high school interactions, or these interactions with these people in this terrorist cell group, to having to deal with the larger societal implications in terms of politics and having to self rule and things of that nature. So I really do enjoy Code Geass for what they do, but it's in my place for its reason.
All right, perfect. I like it. So, Sam, that is our individual list. So, can you run us through your 10 through 1 real quick?
10 through 1, I've got Gunbuster, Rideback, Big O, IGPX, Blue Gender, Pat Labor, Gundam Unicorn, Code Geass, Evangelion, and Gurren Lagann.
Sweet, sweet. So my 10 through 1 is Demon
Hmm.
Bane, Eureka 7, Aquarine or Aquaron, Zoids New Century, Lime Barrels of Iron, Macross Frontal or Frontier, the Big O,
Hmm.
Gunbuster, the Mobile Suit 8th MS Team, and Code Geass. So those are our individual lists. We only have, what, 3 in common, Sam? So now we're going to
So,
grade the
yeah,
podcast list between us. So I have a suggestion.
yes. What's your suggestion?
So if I would like to prioritize similarities. So I think if we're
Let's do
talking
that.
about straight up the first, place 1, 2, and 3, I would think Code Geass, Gurlagon, then Neo Genesis.
Oh, wow, wait. The only one that we have in similarities is Code Geass. You sure you want to do that?
Well, we have Gunbuster, the Big O, and
Yeah.
Code Geass in common, but because your two are higher than, well, I have 1 and you have it as 3, but you have your number 1 and number 2 are not on my list. So if Code
Mhm.
Geass gets placed up to number 1, then I don't mind giving up 2 and 3 for yours 1 and 2.
Oh, wow. I see what you're doing. I see what you're trying to
Be fair, be fair about it.
do. Oh, man. I do agree that they should get the top 3 spot.
You're worried about the
Mm.
order.
A little bit.
Yeah, but my only case is that they're not on my
Yeah,
list at all.
true. But I'm giving up the number 1 spot.
But we have a
um,
similarity, though.
uh, oh man. Oh, it's mm, mm.
Mm.
I'm gonna have to swallow my pride. I'm gonna have to make compromises. So okay. Uh, I'll submit. Code Geass would get the number 1. We'll
All
make
right,
Gurren Lagann number 2.
all right. Wait, you went Gorlion? Oh yeah, okay, cool. All right, that's perfect.
Yes, that's
All
fair.
right, sweet,
That's
sweet,
fair.
sweet. All right, cool. So that means you got 2 on the list, or you got all top 3 of yours. So my next highest would be Team 8 or Team Mobile Suit 8. So can we make that our number 4?
Let me see, because number 4 is my Gundam too. I would say it's been minutes since I've seen Mobile Suit 8, and I remember it was very, very good too. And like you said, with the Band of Brothers, it was a little bit more realistic in terms of the plot armor, which I appreciate because it makes you appreciate the character interactions a whole lot more too.
Right. Yeah. And that's my number 2. So yet to be put on the list.
Okay. No, it's fair. That's
Um,
totally fair. Go
sweet,
ahead,
sweet, sweet.
do that.
All right.
So it's Gundam Mobile Suit Ace. I'm just writing it down so that I can see it in my mind's eye, in my
All
actual
right.
eye, a whole lot
All
better.
right. Cool. All right. Cool. So then I'm thinking that the next similarity we have is Gunbuster.
Yeah. From what you
So
said,
that would be
Gunbuster definitely does need to be higher up on my list.
okay. Cool. So number 5 spot.
And because what was Gunbuster on your spot?
Gunbuster was number 3.
Oh, damn. I'm just making you put all your spots, man. I'm sorry. Um,
It's good. I got the
because
number
what
1
we
spot.
can,
That's all that's matter. Number 1.
because like we can make Evangelion number 5 if we want. It doesn't
Well,
have
that's
to
number
be
3
that
right
high.
now. That's number 3 right
No,
now.
no, I'm saying like we can switch it to number 5 because like I only really put it so high on my list mainly because of the acclaim and the recognizability that it's done. But
Mm.
Evangelion's not even on your list. So it's not fair to you to do that, especially like with you punning all of your other ones.
So Evangelion at 5 and what at 3? All right. So I was thinking that like what you just said, like Neon Genesis at 5, and then what? The Gunbuster at 3, since that's my 3 and your number 10.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, cool.
I trust you on Gunbuster from what I've seen and what you have said.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought you were going to put uh Gurren Lagann at 2, so I thought we would have shared the same spot with Gunbuster. But that's
No,
no problem.
like I said, I just have to finish watching it, and
Right.
all right, so that's good. And just to go through our top 5, I forgot what they called it in Demon Slayer. It was like the bottom moon or the top moon. I can't remember.
Oh yeah, the
Because
lower moon.
before we go on to the lower moon, so we have Code Geass for number 1, Gurren Lagann for number 2, Gunbuster for number 3, Mobile Suit 8th Team for number 4, and Evangelion for number 5.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go on to the lower moon.
I was thinking for moon number 6, we could do Unicorn.
Oh, wait. So I guess like for this list, should we, because are we just limiting Gundam to just one?
No. So yeah, so that was just for our individual list. I mean, I kept that as a requirement for me, and I mean, you get the same, but I guess for the finalists for the podcast, we can do like we just have 2, so it doesn't make sense not to put on Unicorn, especially since we just covered it for so many episodes. So I think having it in the 6th spot would be fine.
We can go ahead and put them there. So 7th lower moon.
Yeah. So the last similarity we have is Big O. So I thought Big O could go there.
Yeah, Big O would be good. Yeah, it's good because I think even in your personal ranking system, isn't number 7 sort of like the midpoint, like the average score?
Yeah, because I put it at number 4 and you had it at number 8, so it's more leaning towards yours ranking, so that's fine with me.
Okay. So lower moon number 8. I was thinking.
Yeah, we need one of yours to be fair, because I've never seen Pad Labor, Pad Labor,
yeah, Pat Labor,
and Blue Gender.
I would say because with Blue Gender seemed to be a bit more gritty and grimy. Nothing too different from any of the other stuff that we've seen. I guess maybe if you would want to say probably a mixture of Gunbuster and Mobile Suit 8th. So I don't necessarily. That was one thing that was interesting too. Is like a lot of these older mecha, because what was it? This came out in 1999. Like the way that they saw, the way that they piloted the mecha, it was sort of like how Ridley piloted her mecha. It was just sort of like her in this sort of cage thing, and the environment she can see herself. She didn't have like a screen between her and the environment. I'm sorry, that was a bit of a side, just a little bit of an observation that I had. But again, it just seemed interesting. So I don't know if I want to put that on there, but I would want to put Pat Labor on there because from what I've seen of it, it seemed like something that you would enjoy, sort of a background noise type thing, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine a little bit. And as I said, it's a little bit more of a levity type show. So I would say it's probably leaning more towards the slice of life comedic action type show that has to deal with the police department. And it seemed like they can, as I said, it seems like they can get into some serious stuff, but I hadn't seen that much of it to attest to whether or not they do that. But I would submit it to be number 8 though.
All right, cool. So skip Blue Gender.
Yeah, skip Blue Gender.
All right, cool. So I don't mind giving 8 to Pat Labor and putting IGPX on number 9.
Wait, so then you don't want to put Zoids at number 9?
I was thinking of like what's more resident with like mech, and even
Yeah.
though Zoids are mech, it's just like I forgot about IGPX, and I think it's a better sports anime than Zoids. I think Zoids is like one
Yeah.
of those gimmicks to make it like interesting. It's like a take on the Zoids franchise, but the whole rollerball kind of that we see in like Battle Angel Alita kind
Yeah.
of plays with the IGPX, and like what you said about the team of Rugrats and underdogs does like resonate, and it does count as anime the same way as not Samurai Jack, but the other samurai dude, Afro Samurai
Oh,
counts
Afro
as
Samurai.
anime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I was thinking we can do then 8 your pad labor and then 9 IGPX.
Okay. So then, who is going to get the number 10 spot? Who is going to be the base standard for our whole list?
That's kind of hard to say. I would say if we're talking about base, then there's no more basic series than Eureka 7.
Oh my goodness. Oh, just you've seen it in its entirety and you said that it's not worth the 50 episodes. So why should it be
That's
on the
very
list?
true.
Why should it be
That's
on the
very
list?
true. No, but what you just said is very true. Okay, so if we need one more on the list, you basically have all of yours except for Ride Back, which I'm going to adamantly say no to. So we
Okay.
could put Gundam, we could put Zoids here just to add on to the diversity of the list.
I guess. But what about line barrels of shotguns? Because your
Yeah.
synopsis of that one,
Mhm.
it made it sound pretty good. Or we could put Macross there too, because Macross is another big name for.
That's true. Well, if I was going to say that which one, even though I put it higher, I have Macross Frontier at 5 and
Yeah.
Line Barrels at 6. I would say Line Barrels is more of a base standard. Again, if number 10 is our base, then that's
Hmm.
just a solid, good starting place for Mecha. The idle stuff and Frontier might put off people too much.
But it's just interesting though, because like if done very well, it can again, like you said, you can see or get exposed to what it's like to be a model. For instance, have you caught up on Agretzko or no?
Not yet, no.
Okay, because there's a little bit of that happens in that show, and I just want to say like the way that they do it, even though it's something different from normally that's done in the show, they do it in a way that's organic and it feels like it just belongs in the show, mainly because of how that show normally deals with themes such as character motivations and adaptability. But you've seen Macross, so if you feel as though that the idol thing is going to be more off-putting than inviting, then I agree with you.
All
So
right,
that,
cool.
or at
So
least,
Line Barrels.
what about Aquarion though? Because you also said pretty good things about Aquarion too.
Yeah, that's at 8, so it's still way up the list, lower on the list than the other two you mentioned. So
Okay.
if it's between Macross and Line Barrels, then I'm going to say Line Barrels.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's do it.
So to count down the list for the combined list for the show podcast, Sam, do you want to take 10? We alternate.
Sure. So for number 10, we have line barrels of shotgun.
Iron.
Oh, I'm sorry.
At
It's
number
the line bear. Wait. So what's the full list? What's the full title again?
Line Barrels of Iron.
Line barrels of iron. Okay. I need to know how so I can find it. Line barrels of iron. Okay.
Number 9 is IGPX.
And number 8 is Pat Labor.
Number 7, the Big O.
Number 6, Gundam Unicorn.
Number 5, Neon Genesis Evangelion.
And number 4, Gundam Mobile Suit 8th Team.
Number 3, Gunbuster.
Number 2, Tegan Toppen Gurren Lagann.
And number 1 in his rightful spot as king of Mecha is Code Geass.
uh,
Yay! Code Geass!
Yay! You
All
get this
right.
wing.
How did you like that? How do you like that, Sam? Good list.
I would have to say it's a good list, and if anything, I'm satisfied with Code Geass being number one. I wouldn't have let any other one taken that spot aside from the one that you know that I prefer, but it's a good stand-in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was very surprised. Like, I mean, you're the avid mecha lover, and I'm kind of the casual atheist of mecha. So I'm
Yeah,
glad that I have this list of, not beloved, but like my top three are like beloved ones. Like, it's my favorite Gundam.
yeah.
My Gunbuster is my stand-in for Gurren Lagann. Code Geass is like the greatest of all time.
Mhm.
Fanboy moment. I would go like get the author's autograph, have T-shirts, dressed up as Lelouch, and all that jazz. So yeah, so it's a good list. I like it. So Sam, that wraps up our first top 10 list episode. So anything you would like to say before we close out?
I dig giant robots. Chicks dig giant robots. So we should dig giant robots.